Thank you so much. I was in a hurry trying to get here through all of the traffic. Wasn't expecting it to be so crazy. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to all of you and to really talk about the future of how we're going to be natively extending Bitcoin really with a secure yield generation. And I want to start off by saying Go is uniquely positioned to really lead the next Bitcoin wave in terms of development, mainly because of two factors: its cost efficiency and the transformable potential that it has due to the fact that we're using Ethereum and other key technologies that most developers will enjoy using. And the problem that we found as an ecosystem when looking at the Bitcoin development scenario was, well, where are all the tools? And you could see that like Bitcoin development is only getting harder and harder every 4 years. The hash rate is doubling. And so the developer tools that are actually there to enable whether Bitcoin actually becomes equitable, not just this hodled asset that you continue to hold and not actually use, we're trying to say, the reason why that is because there's no development tooling around it. How can you build development tooling where it's just purely on L1, and L1 is, it's just like Ethereum, where Ethereum needed to extend over to an L2, for example, and we needed to build technologies that were going to enable more, let's say, progressive mindsets of development instead of maximalist mindsets where we stagnate the development around any protocol when we start developing these kinds of mindsets. And I think Bitcoin is going through this phase right now where we can actually adventure into new forms of development, and we're going to try to do that today. But we have to enable more trust. But right now, there is no trust. We've talked to just about every Bitcoin developer at a lot of different conferences, and the number one thing they're going to tell you is that I don't want to move my assets. I don't trust you. I don't trust your sequencer. I don't know what you're doing with my Bitcoin. And so, right, there's a lot of these challenges that we as an ecosystem, especially all BTC L2 ecosystems, have to sort of trial and get around. And so we looked at the landscape and we understood that, yes, Bitcoin needed more developers. Key reason is that there are so many holders. There's about 219 million holders of Bitcoin, but little less than 300 to 500 actual daily active users, thousands of daily active users actually using it. And so that can't generate any sort of sustainable yield. There's a difference between yield and interest, right? So yield is something that happens when you actually generate a transaction volume on the network. And then yield is actually happening because you're delegating tokens to the sequencers or to potentially like a validator. And so the sequencer is really just responsible for delegating rewards back to the people who are actually making the network turn and burn. And so last year, when we were looking at how many of these Bitcoins were actually being utilized, in just 2024, you got wrap BTC, BTCB, you got CBDBTC. However, all of this liquidity that's just wrapped up in Bitcoin is hardly ever used. And so we looked at it and said there needed to be like this perfect model. Like if we were going to actually make a really great BTC-L2, what would that actually look like? It would look something like this. So the positive feedback loop, which is where you have a Bitcoin holder who has to obviously lock some Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, but we want to be able to enable where not just one person is getting all the Bitcoin, but multiple operators are getting the delicate stake of a Bitcoin asset, for example. The decentralized sequencer is a missing component in the BitVM2 white paper, and it's also not really often discussed in how do we actually decentralize a Bitcoin layer 2 protocol. We stand out in this because decentralized sequencing is a way of doing and performing in a multi-party computation or a threshold agreement with multiple operators in order to do and perform a consensus-like algorithm so that we can enable a layer 2 rollup using zero-knowledge proofs. And that's what we call the GOAT network ecosystem. It's an Ethereum virtual machine with a decentralized sequencer that is effectively allowing holders to lock BTC to the sequencer, anyone that they choose, in order to generate yield called YBTC. And then this is then used within the network and then users on both the L2 as well as the L1 get to lock either YBTC on the L2 or BTC on the L1 through a permissionless bridge. That is like the holy grail of solutions. And so just to get to that, you need these three security assumptions like I have already listed. First of all, the decentralized sequencer is the key part. But the other one is the fact that we actually needed to do a trustless bridging protocol that was architected actually back in 2023 when we were doing the BitVM2 research. And so centralized sequencers have a dilemma where by integrating sequencers, they have to go through a single commitment. And that single sequencer that's committing the rest of the sequence operators their validity proof to the Bitcoin network, that's a single sequencer honesty assumption, and there's a lot of risk. And you see other ecosystems like Optimism and Arbitrum and many other L2 protocols not actually getting away from the single shared sequencing risk problem. There was also the problem of cost. And so if you're going to actually build a validity proof, we needed to build something where it didn't need a token and it didn't require an Ethereum rollup on top of Ethereum. We needed something more general that was going to scale, so we chose ZKM due to the fact that it had a prover time that was a lot faster than RISC-0, as well as the cost efficiency was slightly, if not as conservative as SP1. And so overall, the architecture to our way forward is that we needed to build an in-house ZKM technology in order to do a low-cost, generative, zero-knowledge rollup that can then allow us to do a decentralized consensus through layer 2, where we can sync our data with BTC L1 through BitVM2 and taproot signatures. And so we can verify validity proofs directly on L1 using Ethereum. And this is the big picture, because once we enable one sequencer for one Bitcoin and obviously for one Ethereum, the idea is that the ZKM can actually be a decentralized sequencer set to enable the entangled rollup, not just for Ethereum, but as well for FVM, SVM, and other networks alike. This is the entire stack. If we put together all of our technology and we actually enable an open market competition between multiple sequencers, we can then achieve a sustainable, cost-effective, and a secure solution that is also apt for a sustainable growth within our network. And that's why we say that we have a sustainable yield protocol. We are more secure, we do have more yield, and if we have more users, that's actually how you generate a yield. So for anyone who's claiming that they have yield optimization, it's not real. There is many different factors to it. I'd love to go into each one of them. It's a lot of information all at once, and I'm known throwing to you. But hopefully you can understand. This is the encode hack. If you wanted to, any developers that are out there who wanted to actually continue working with us throughout the week, that's there for you as well. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, yeah, so slightly over the 5 minutes. Round of applause for Dylan, that was amazing. So we've ate into the question time now, but we do have 2 minutes of questions from the jury now for Dylan. So please fire away.
Could you just talk me through, or just high level, a user journey, right? I have my Bitcoin. Do I have the option through Goat Network to secure the decentralized sequencer with my Bitcoin and earn yield on it? Do I then get a derivative on Goat Network, or is the option to either do that or have the derivative and yield and pay?
Great question. So with Goat Network, what you're doing is that you have the option of locking Bitcoin directly on the L1, and then we have a bridge that is going to look at the taproot verifier and then say, hey, our signature says that our sequencer needs to claim this stack, but then we actually opted into our data availability layer so that users on L1 can withdraw back to the L1. But to answer your question, it's not a wrapped asset. It's actually the gas of the network. So gas is denoted in BTC on GOAT. So as soon as you bridge, you get gas, and then you lock the gas to a sequencer yet again to generate YBTC, and then that is used as sort of like a Pendle-like asset or a zero-day bond. So we can get deeper into principal and obviously Y token assets.
So can you navigate how the yield, where yield comes from? Is it from the gas, like on your network, or?
Yeah, so it's a multi-convoluted issue, right? So yield is not just like, oh, you have a great tech. It's because you have a cost-effective solution as a layer 2, and you're also able to generate a validity proof where the cost of the machine itself isn't outweighing the cost of the actual network in order to prove, hey, like these operators deserve this 30% that they claim. So you need a cost-effective L2, and we needed a cheap enough validity proof to effectively do this in time. So there was a lot of moving pieces. You needed a correct ZKM, the correct layer 2 rollup. We're using Comet BFT, so we are taking a little bit of the Cosmos stack in order to actually make the sequencer. And we do something very similar to what Evmos had done, where we actually placed the Ethereum virtual machine on the hypervisor and allowed a port channel directly to a sequencer. So it's a multi-layer stack.
Yeah, but I mean, the yield comes from the fees or from where?
The yield comes from all user-generated fees, but it's only able to generate yield if the cost of the infrastructure doesn't outweigh the cost of actually optimizing the sequencer to continue operation. We found a solution where we can get a pretty decent yield. I can't say exact answers, but yeah.
That's it. We're wrapping up. So completely out of time. Give it up for Dylan. All right. So